working? Can you hear me? I don't even know if we need it. Yeah, so like John said, my name's Matt. I currently work at South by Southwest on their sales team. I'll kind of get into the way that that's structured later, but essentially we have like a full tech team too, but I'm specifically working for sales. So yeah, the way I'll kind of do it, I don't have anything written out because I figured I would just read it all and it would be kind of boring. So I'll just kind of go off the cuff, and if you guys have any comments or questions, just throw them at me and we can go that way. If I'm boring with the topic, throw something else out there. We'll go down a different direction. So yeah, I think that I'm probably one of John's favorite students, basically because of the situation that kind of led into me becoming a developer. So if your goal was to be his favorite student, it's kind of already taken. But yeah, so kind of just going all the way back. I just turned 31, but I've had a number of different jobs in that short time. Originally from Virginia, moved here to Texas right before high school in the North Austin area, like around Pflugerville. And I decided that I wanted to work at a church, and so I went to Bible college. So I did that for a minute. I was a youth pastor, did the Bible college thing, realized people can be mean at churches. And so I left, and I was in Dallas at the time. My wife was from that area, but kind of switched with me. She came back here, went to UT, and so I was like, I want to get married, and I'm going to have to move here to do that. And I liked Austin, so it wasn't a problem. So I moved back here, we got married, and I had a friend that was a teacher, and he was like, have you ever considered teaching? I said no, and he was like, well, we have an open position here. I think you'd be great at it. You just have to do these certifications. You already have your degree, all that fun stuff. And so I did it, and I became an elementary school special ed teacher, and man, it was a crazy experience. And I did that for 4 years. I literally thought I'd be there 1 year, and then I would do something else that I actually wanted to do. I'd always been interested like in design, and I was like, okay, I'm going to pursue my design career. I'll do this for a minute just so I have some money coming in. Well, I ended up liking it. I ended up liking the team that I was on. And so, ended up staying. I feel like I learned a ton. I don't have kids. Probably part of the reason is because I did that for 4 years. I had enough of the kid thing, and then I could go home and not have kids and send them on to their parents. So that was cool. But yeah, so probably year 3-ish, I started getting back into this. I want to be a designer, graphic designer, something like that. And so I had friends that were kind of in that field. One in particular that I hung out with, that he said, if you're going to get into that, it would be great if you knew how to code. And I was like, okay, I've never really considered this before. That's beyond me. Don't know anything about it. Like, I literally didn't even know HTML. Knew nothing. Knew that I could mess around in Photoshop with design stuff, and that's it. And had a bunch of like artist friends that I followed. So this guy pushed me. He went to a boot camp called Maker Square in Austin, which was completely different at the time. I think it was a Ruby on Rails course. Now they've been bought out by like Hack Reactor. They're straight JavaScript, and they're big time now. But at the time, he was doing that, so he learned HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Ruby. And he was similar to me, didn't know anything before, kind of had read that, what book is John Duckett book? Is that the HTML and CSS? And so he's like, just read this book, you'll be good to go, like when you go in there. And I'm like, okay, thinking everyone else is like me, everyone else is gonna be on the same level. And so anyway, I had put feelers out there a bunch. I'd talked to Maker Square for a while. And it's just one of those things. Life gets in the way. It's easier to not do something than to do something. I don't know if you've ever been in that position. Laziness is a struggle for me. So anyway, I put it off, and it was like, the bad thing about Maker Square is there's a course that starts like every month. And so it was like, well, I didn't meet the deadline for this one, so I'll just hit next month. Well, like 9 months go by, and I still haven't officially done anything besides like a pre-interview. Well, I keep going, and I hear of this other one called Coder Vox. And a guy named John Liu is there. And so I was like, man, this is kind of cool. There's only, like 4 people per class, where the other one was like, I believe like 20 or 30 maybe. So student-teacher ratio good. Remember, I don't know anything, so that's going to be a positive for me. And so we set up a Skype interview, and I was like, okay, this will be telling. This is where I'm going to figure out if this is what I want to do. Also, if I'm being completely honest, the prerequisites and stuff that you had to do for Coder Vox were a lot less than Maker Square. Maker Square was super daunting. You had to do a couple projects, I think, before you could even get in. Again, laziness versus not having to do as much. So anyway, going back, met with John. I feel like there's a connection there in that first interview. And I remember him saying, like, we have 1 spot left. There might be this other guy. And I'm like pleading with him. Because at this point in the interview, I'm like, okay, this is what I want. And he's kind of like dangling it out there, like, maybe you can get in, but I'm not going to promise you anything. So, I'm desperate for this. I'm desperate for Coder Vox in my life. So, and at this point, not to mention, my teaching career was, I was struggling because, like I said, I worked special ed. They had just moved me to a different school. And while I'd been working with like autistic elementary school kids, so super cute, they're saying, funny words and all that kind of stuff, and you're kind of like, man, this is fun. I'm really making a difference in helping them out. Well, they had moved me to another school with a behavior unit, and I had gotten bit to where it drew blood 6 times in a row in like this short time frame of a couple months. So I'm having to go to the doctor like every day, because every time it draws blood, I'm like, this happened again. So I was ready to leave, and my wife was ready for me to leave. I have staplers flying at my head, which isn't fun. I was thinking there has to be more to life than this. So anyway, had the Coder Vox interview. I'm like, I'll find a way to get this money. I'll take out the loans. I'll do whatever, John. And so, it happened. Somehow it happened. We made it work. So I filled out all the work. It started in February of that year, I believe. So this was like 2 years ago. Yeah. Year and a half. Something like that. Time flies. So yeah, it happened, and I'm like, okay, I'm doing something with my life. And it was around this time that I was turning 30. So it was like that point in my life to where I was questioning everything. I've been through my 20s. What have I accomplished? Yeah, I've helped out these kids, but now I'm getting bit all the time. That's not fun. So it would be great if I could, finally get to do this design thing that I wanted to do, or, have a job that I'm proud to tell other people. My wife and I always joked, because she lives up in the Dallas area, and we kept having to go back up there for weddings. And, just like selfishly, and like the pride factor comes in, and it's like, how great would it be with all these people that like knew me a long time ago to say, I have this really cool job now, and then they can look at you differently and blah, 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 because that's really what it's all about. So yeah, Coder Vox was happening. I immediately told the school I'm out, and they were like, I kind of understand, you have bite marks on your arm. And it was literally like that. They didn't even question it. It's the middle of the year, but they're like, we don't blame you. So yeah, took a couple weeks off, started in February. So I get in there the first day. Like I said, I'd read my John Duckett book, felt good. I talked to my friend that had done a boot camp. He'd gotten hired on as a JavaScript junior developer somewhere. And so I'm feeling positive. I'm also just thinking, if this guy can do it, not that he's not smart, but I'm just thinking, we're about the same level. If he can do it, I can do it. Everything is going my way. So I walk in on the first day, feeling good, got my MacBook with me, get in there, sit down, everybody's super nice. We had instructors and John, a couple other guys, and there's 4 people in the class. And there's a younger guy in the class that was, I believe, early 20s, and he's super outspoken, I guess you could say, and he starts throwing out all these questions, and I look over at him, and I'm like, oh no. I don't even know anything that he's talking about. All these questions. Come to find out later, he just likes to talk a lot and probably didn't even know half of what he thought he knew. But John can't admit that, but it happened. But anyway, I'm sitting there I just quit my job. I thought this was going to be a smooth transition and I'm going to make a lot of money now. That's the plan. And so one day in, I'm like, I'm so far behind already. And another guy was an Ivy League graduate. We're going around the room, and I'm like, I just came from an elementary school. So I'm intimidated, and the crazy part is my personality is super laid back. I don't let things get to me. It's very hard to get me worked up about anything. But then all of a sudden, when I see my life going down this path that I just gave up not that I couldn't get another job again, but it's I'm in debt now, and I made this move, and I don't have anything right now. And, we needed my income in order to live. My wife makes okay money too, but it's good to have both of them. So anyway, so I'm 1 week in, and I'm like, okay, no, I can figure this out. It was just the first day. We're just going through what we're going to cover. We didn't even go into anything, but these questions are scaring me a little bit. So first week, I think that we spent a day or 2 days on HTML and CSS, which I probably needed a couple weeks on that, because I didn't know as much even as I thought I did. I'm scrolling through that book, but I didn't really know it all. Which I was kind of okay, but I was already feeling like I was getting behind 3 days in, and so I'm terrified. And I'm trying to think of the first point that I came to John and was like, I'm in trouble, man. I'm struggling. It was probably too late when I actually said that, but it happened. And I had basically the process went, I think we did HTML and CSS. We did some GitHub stuff. I'm trying to think of everything early on. Yeah, I think that was maybe second week we got into JavaScript. And by that point, I'm just completely lost. And it's to the point to where I'm I'm going to have to just not even pay attention and focus on one of these things in the hopes that maybe if I can get this, I'll be able to catch up, which isn't a great plan. That's not going to work. So that was happening, and I'd kind of, the outspoken guy in the beginning, I'm I'm going to latch on to that guy because he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. And so we ended up meeting up and hanging out, and he wasn't a great teacher, but I was desperate. So we would go over the homework and stuff together. And I felt like I was picking up a little bit more. Turns out I was just confusing myself even more. So I think I went back I met with all you guys for maybe a second time. Desperation was really setting in. The meeting was tense. And there was an assistant teacher too that was there that kind of, said that he would help me out. So I think it was that point to where we kind of realized that every other student in that course, because it was a PHP course, it was more focused on back-end stuff, and the 3 other guys were all back-end minded, to where I had said coming in, I was in it for the design. So I was much more front-end minded, and we spent a couple days on that, and we moved past it. So I think it was John's idea. I'm going to give John credit for the idea if it wasn't, because it saved my life. But so he was like, what if you just focused on front end and like that was your thing? And I was like, yes, I like that idea. And you know, the funny part is, and I'm kind of all over the place here, if you have any questions, stop me, but the funny part is, looking back now where I am, a year and a half, 2 years later, I'm remembering like all this PHP stuff that I thought that I had no clue what was going on, because as I'm front end focused, I was still like in with everybody else trying to pick up on all this stuff, and we're talking about like SQL, we're talking about PHP, and I'm kind of just like, it's all like this. But now I realize that, and I think it'll happen for you guys too. I'm not 100% sure on how much that you've done. And I think John pushed this too, was you don't realize how much you know until you, like I would go home to my wife and be like, man, I'm really struggling. And I would like say a couple things and she'd be like, you know something, because I have no clue what you're talking about. Like, you know more than most people will ever know about this stuff. So even in my past two developer jobs, there's stuff that's just popped into my head that I didn't even realize that I knew, but I'm applying it to my work. So just, it's crazy how that works. And just constantly keeping up with it and learning new things is definitely key. Going back, so we're in the boot camp, and like I said, John was an absolute lifesaver for me. He kind of took over as my instructor, where the other instructor was struggling with me. He was frustrated that I didn't know as much as the others, I guess. So as it went on, I felt a little bit better, but being that laid back person, that whole part of me was just gone during the entire boot camp. I believe it was like February through May or June or something like that. And I was just uncomfortable the whole time. I would dread going in. My wife knows that I was just a complete mess on the weekends. Like, I was at home, like, trying to do this stuff. I was just a mess all the time. And we'd kind of known, like, hey, we're not going to be able to do a whole lot during these months that I'm doing this, because it's full time the whole time. But I think those were just words that you say, and it wasn't really fully realized until you actually like get in there and do it. So moral of that story is, it's really hard. And I don't think that I'm a dumb person. I think that I'm a pretty smart guy, and for some reason I really struggled with this at first. And even in certain areas I do now. But I think once you realize and get that base, the overall thing is not that complicated. Google's pretty cool. The internet's pretty cool, because like all the answers are on there. And like on a daily basis at South by Southwest, one of the biggest festivals in the country, I just Google things that I don't know and I figure them out. They don't necessarily know all that because they don't know anything about tech. My bosses have no clue what I do, and she pretty much told me that the other day. She was like, you just do this. I don't understand anything you're saying, but just get it done and I'll be happy. So yeah, probably if they knew that like I only know about half the things and Google the rest of them, they wouldn't be thrilled with that. But the job gets done either way. Yeah, so going back to the boot camp, we decided John was taking over my instructing. I was going to be his star pupil. He said, I'm going to make this guy that is nothing something, and it'll be my greatest victory. And he did it. So, yeah, we went through it, and one of the other leaders of the boot camp had like a sushi, I can't talk, sushi restaurant that like needed a website done. They were like, this could be your end project. Everybody was going to do a big end project. Most of the other guys, it was like all back-end related and looked like junk, but like it was very complicated. And that's not me at all. Like, I want it to look pretty, and even if it's not that much work, but as long as it looks pretty, like that's what I like. So yeah, Bootstrap we did a lot of. We did some jQuery, we did some JavaScript. So all of that front end fun stuff, John led me through. And lynda.com videos are cool. We like those. And Udacity, that's cool. And Udemy, that's cool. And there's a lot of people out there, all my developer friends now, they're like, yeah, you could have just done like Udemy or Udacity courses and like not wasted your money. For me, I couldn't have. Like now, I will go and do those courses and be fine and like learn a new thing. I've done a bunch of that recently, or lynda.com. But without that base, I was completely lost. And so there are some people that, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't want to cut you off, but from what you were saying about like kind of feeling overwhelmed and all that stuff, I had a question about tools, but you can finish what you were saying.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, now I use Udemy, Udacity, and can learn stuff, but without that base, I was struggling with it. Go ahead.
Okay, so we all don't have all the time in the world to check out all the tools that are used for every single freaking little thing that's available out there. How do you go about evaluating which tools would be best for you to use?
Yeah, for me, it's kind of a trial and error thing, because I was trying to think of some of the things, like I think Code School, which if you guys use any of these in here, I don't want to bash anything that you're like, use these for sure. But I think that was one that somebody at the boot camp suggested to me, and it was terrible. Is it that one? Or there was something that was like, it's walking you through the steps of each thing. And I was like, Code Academy was one. Yes, that was one for sure. So it's walking me through the steps. And I'm like, man, I'm amazing. I know JavaScript. And then you took away Code Academy and gave me, just Sublime Text. And I'm like, where was that little box that told me everything? So that just handicapped me big time. And so I learned early on, while it's fun and I think that I'm learning a lot, it was terrible for me. So I don't use that anymore on anything, even if it's something I don't know now and I'm trying to learn. So yeah, it's trial and error. I've found success with Lynda a lot, Udacity, Udemy. Lynda for sure, because I learned early on I'm super visual in my learning. And a lot of times, I think that we talked about this, I would just watch them, not do anything, watch them all the way through, and then go back and there's like, example exercises that you can do, but just kind of taking everything in at first. I also learned that I'm not good with reading it in a book or reading it off of a PDF. I had, so in my last job, which I'll get to in a minute, that was how the guy that was overseeing our team of developers, when we were learning a new thing, he would throw like this 1,000-page PDF at us and be like, read this section, and that does nothing for me. So I ended up like having to find my own materials just because that's how I learn. And especially this, I can't read it in a book. And trial and error, doing it and messing up and figuring it out on your own is going to be the greatest thing ever. And a lot of this stuff right now, like when I was in the place that you were, which this was only like a year and a half, 2 years ago, so it's weird even saying like, when I was where you were, that was like a couple days ago, it feels like. But I feel like a different person. I feel successful now. Yeah, does that answer your question at all? Okay. So those are ones that I recommend, because you're getting that video of somebody else doing it, or like just watch John and do everything that he does. Like that's also another thing. But he knows like all this stuff too, if you ever have questions. And also, if you ever have questions for me, there's my email address. But ask them in here too. Trial and error, it's a big thing. Go ahead.
I had another question. What did you think was the most difficult part for you in actually finding your first job after the coding camp was over?
Man, let me get to that in 2 seconds when I go through the story, because I'm definitely going to touch on that, because that was a journey. That was like a whole new stress level, which is fun, because I didn't have enough stress anyway. So yeah, we did this sushi restaurant website, and I'm like, man, I'm gonna do a real website, because I remember the first time we did, we're like learning HTML, and we did that lost pet form. Do you remember this? So he was like, make a form and like make up a lost pet. So I actually had a pet, so I just like put my cat's picture on there, and I'm like, Sir Jorah, that's his name from Game of Thrones, he's lost, and like did all these fields on there. Well, I brought it home and showed my wife. I was like, look, I just built this form and it works. And she's like, oh, that's what it looks like? Like, this is what you're gonna do? And it's like the most basic HTML ever. And I was like, you don't even get it. You don't get how hard this was. Like, go in. We're not doing design yet. So anyway, at the end, I'm like, I'm gonna build a real website that like looks cool and people are gonna think it's cool and that I actually know how to do something. But at that point, I still was very much questioning my skills and abilities. But I'm like, okay, if I have an opportunity, that would be cool. So yeah, it was super low level. Like, they had no expectations. Their website looked like something from like the early 90s. So it was gonna be, I mean, if I would have done the same thing as my missing cat form, they probably would have been happy with it. I should have like pulled that up. I probably have it somewhere. But anyway, yeah, so Bootstrap became my best friend and still is to this day. And I remember when like John we were like walking through that, and he's like, look at this, and my eyes are like big like a cartoon. I'm like, whoa, because this is helpful. And like once you get to the point to where you can like understand some of the basics of like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or not just the basics, kind of like more in-depth stuff, it's fun to have helpers to where you don't have to write out every single piece of code. Actually, that's just fun no matter what when you have helpers in anything. So I used a lot of Bootstrap to make my sushi site, and that was going to be my final project. So like I said, the other guys had all their stuff, and we had, I don't know if you guys are going to do this, but we had a day at the end to where different business leaders from all these different places, like big time people, they weren't necessarily going to come in and hire us, but we were going to do a presentation for them, and we had kind of like they would go around, we were sitting all around the room, they would go from station to station, and we would do like a little pitch to them. Hey, here's my project, here's what it does, here's how I did it. And I guess if they were like super blown away, maybe they would have hired us, but I don't think anybody got hired out of that. But yeah, so I presented this. I guess now would be a good time for me to pull up my sushi site. Okay, yeah, so this is the site that I did for Hakata Sushi, which it's kind of funny now. It's not live anymore because I don't think that they had anybody that could like operate it or like update it, and they weren't paying me for it, so I had a real job at this point. So yeah, it's a simple single page. You can scroll all the way down it, and there's our chefs, and a little menu, gallery, photos pop up. All these photos are courtesy of John Liu Photography. Very impressive. Map, all that. But, you can also go from section to section like that. I think the only outside other page was on the menu. It goes, if you go to the full menu, it goes like that. But yeah, so this is my project, and I was super impressed with myself at this point because I was nothing, and now I built an actual website for somebody. And it's funny, I'd love to like go back now and talk to these people that I did the presentation for, because I feel like after I'd made this, I'd kind of gotten super cocky, and I was like, yeah, like I made this for, and they're like, okay, these guys built like all this back end stuff over here, and I was like, don't worry about that, this looks good. But yeah, nobody was gonna hire me for this. So yeah, by the end, I had felt, an uptick in positivity for sure. And it was a lot on or based on basically that climax, that turning point was me discovering I needed to focus on like front end development, because that was more my mindset. And to me, it goes to like, what kind of a person are you? Because I'm much more that like creative person, and I just was geared towards this, and that other just wasn't going to work at the time. Which it's funny now, because I do like a lot of back-end stuff in my job, which when I was learning about that, I would have never thought that. I was like almost half paying attention, because I was like, I'll never do this stuff. It doesn't interest me, anything like that. But yeah, so let's get into your job question. So you had asked, go ahead.
When you said nobody would hire you based on the merits of the site you built here, which I think was good, why do you?
Okay, yeah, I shouldn't have said it like that. So he was saying I'd made the comment nobody was going to hire me based on this site. I kind of meant the people that were there, because they were all looking at these more back-end projects. So I doubt that they were going to be super impressed by my Hakata Sushi site that was no more than, just it kind of looked pretty. But, I mean, I feel like I actually did get my first job based off of this, because this was pretty much all that I had, but it was a front-end developer position. So, yeah, you'd asked earlier about kind of the finding a job process. So that was one thing that I remember questioning John a whole lot on in the beginning, before I even started the boot camp, because I was super worried about a job. It was like, I'm quitting my job. It's going to take everything to not have income coming in. Like we were living off, my wife's a social worker, so that doesn't pay a ton. But we were like living off of her salary, and like took out a loan for the boot camp. And a little bit more to kind of live off of at that time. So it was tight. And which it was hard also, just kind of sidebar, the outspoken guy that was in our class also was like ridiculously rich. And so I'm like, I don't have any money because I'm taking this boot camp. And he's like, I do everything all the time, just come with me. And so I was like, okay, I like fun things. So that was crazy. Actually talked to him the other day. That was interesting. So, yeah, where was I going with that?
The job.
The job, yes. So I'd asked John about it, and I think that that they were like kind of questioning me early on, because I was like asking so many questions about what goes into the job process afterwards. Like I was already like so focused on that, but it was more of I had to be focused on that, and I had to be focused on this, because I knew I wasn't going to make it much longer after the boot camp, living wise, because I was going to run out of money. So I was already in a panic, because this wasn't going as smoothly as my plan in my head of go to boot camp, get a bunch of money at my developer job right away. So that conversation was continuous, like, can I get an internship, do you think? Like, would somebody hire me for that? Can I get a junior developer job? Full developer job is out of the question, because nobody would ever hire me for that. And I'm just thinking all these things.
Not with that attitude.
Not with that. That's a great point. Yeah. I mean, if I would have known now what I knew then, that it was all going to work out, then that would have been completely different. So now you can take my struggles and not have to worry about anything, because it's all going to work out. And that was the thing that they'd kind of said at the boot camp also, was like, we can't promise you anything, but like we have connections, but we're not guaranteeing you a job. And I was like, just say that you'll find me one no matter what. That's all I want to hear, and then I'll stop asking. But they couldn't, because then I would have like sued them or something like that. I don't know. So anyway, it came time at the end, and so it's like, I still felt like, nobody's ever going to care about you as much as you care about you. So I'm thinking about me and my family the whole time, to where they're just kind of like, yeah, like we're wrapping up the boot camp, like we did pretty good. And I'm like, okay, so about that job, you said it's probably going to happen. So I keep saying it, and everybody's putting feelers out there. which is great. I appreciated them doing that. But I kind of started like taking matters into my own hands on the side, even though like I definitely didn't know what I was doing. I was just emailing like Indeed.com, what jobs do you have that say developer in them? And I'm sure so many people looked at my resume and like what I was doing, they're like, this guy's crazy to think he could ever work here. But I was just like, I was going for that theory of throw as many out as possible and hope that one sticks. I don't care if I'm embarrassing myself in front of all these people. I don't have to talk to them. So, eventually I started talking to John. I was like, so I found this junior developer job. What do you think about it? And he'd be like, hey, that could be something. I was like, good, because I already applied 2 days ago. So it was going to happen either way. So yeah, I did a lot of that. So again, trial and error. It's a big thing. It's going to happen in this field, whether it's with jobs or not. And again, got super discouraged. I'm trying to think of how long it was towards like when we presented, which was kind of around the end of the boot camp, to when I actually got a job. I want to say it was 5 or 6 weeks, which looking back, I would have been like, that's not horrible. Like,
you were going to say more than that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Illusion first.
Yeah, that's true. I don't even really count that because I was there for like a minute. But so yeah, I got like I was trying to think of the best way to describe it. It was like a call-in. I don't know if you've heard of Volusion before, but they do like e-commerce websites like that, Big Commerce, and what's the other? Shopify, yeah. Shopify is the big one. So you can make your site just any everyday person. It's like paint by numbers, so you can just kind of like put it all together. You don't have to have developer knowledge, but there is some like HTML and CSS stuff. So they hire like almost like a call-in center to where people can call you and be like, I don't know how to change the color right here, and you're like, push red. So it's not the most like uplifting job. Like you don't feel like you know a whole lot at that point. But yeah, so I did get hired by one of those, and the pay was not great. It was less than I was making as a teacher, and so I was kind of disappointed in that. But I was like, well, I got something. I was gonna have nothing. I was gonna be like out on the street, but I'm not. So that happened early on, and that was part of the just throw a bunch of stuff out there and see if something sticks. And really, I probably was overqualified for that position, even as underqualified as I was, because I'd gone to a boot camp. And this goes back to what I'd said before about in my past job, which I keep saying I'll get to in a minute. I really will get to it in a minute. But I worked with a developer, super smart, and he only did, I think it was a Udemy course. He did like the full stack developer course, which I did as well, which is amazing. I would recommend all of you do it, even after this whole course. It's great, just like fundamentals and follow-up. So that's udemy.com. Any of those Udemy courses, they put out specials all the time. They're like $9 to learn like a whole thing. It's amazing. Do it. Because these courses are a lot more expensive. But learn in here too. So yeah, I was talking to him about that, and he didn't go to a developer boot camp. He went to just a regular college, got a regular degree, and then learned this online. And even though he was super smart, which sometimes you can get by with this, and he had learned really quickly just through that, a lot of places just looked at him and was like, you don't have any developer education. And even though, I feel like there are some jobs of people that I've heard that they'll be like, I can whiteboard out all this code or something, and they don't necessarily have the resume looking great, but they can just do it. And some places that works for. But a lot of them, he wasn't even getting in the door because he didn't have that boot camp on his resume. So that's why I said earlier, looking back, so glad that I did Coder Vox, because that, even if I would know nothing, I could at least get an interview because they were saying, oh man, he put in the time. He quit his other job to go do this. He put in, that 4 or 5 months. And so he's legit. He really wants to do this, or he really does know how to do this, or he's been trained in a way that's going to make him successful here. So so I got that Volusion deal, but because the pay wasn't great, I was still throwing stuff out there to other places. And one of the places that responded back was a company called Lifeway, which is based in Nashville, but they have an Austin office of like remote developers. And it's crazy how it all happened, because it's happened to me twice. I've had 2 developer jobs. It's happened both times. I can't explain it at all. I don't know if this is, I've heard that it happens to other people too. I don't know why, but it's like you either have a drought of hearing nothing, or it just rains on you with everybody throwing offers at you. And it's a whole different kind of stress level, because then you're like, what if I pick the wrong one? What if my future doesn't look great here? And I know like that's not the kind of, everybody is like, I'd love to have that problem. Like all these places offering you a bunch of money, but you get into that whole other thing. So anyway, I'm fresh out of the boot camp, and I'm like, whoa, multiple places want me. And so all of a sudden you feel really good about yourself. I'm bringing something to the table. They loved the fact that I had gone to a boot camp. They harped on that so much. And so I had them and one other company going back and forth. And I was so nervous at this point, but I played the game of, I'm going to see if I can get more money out of this. And I was terrified as I was doing it. And I was like, listen, man, I love you guys, but this other company, I've got to protect my family. I've got to make more. And they're like, man, thank you for being honest with us. And I completely get that. And I'm like, how is this working right now? I had nothing, and they're like upping my offer. So anyway, so I went with Lifeway. A couple of reasons. I was automatically going to be, all their developers, they were ebook developers, and I was automatically going to be more knowledgeable than any other developer on the team, which makes me feel good, because I knew, JavaScript, Bootstrap, jQuery, a little bit of PHP, a little bit of SQL. And they were only working in HTML, CSS, and a tiny bit of JavaScript. I mean, they didn't know JavaScript. They would like memorize certain lines of code that they adapted in a tiny way. So I went in there thinking, I'm a huge deal. And my head got really big at that point. But essentially that job was just, so they have a web app that is similar on a smaller scale. So it's like a Christian company. So I've gone full circle to where I was a youth pastor, and now I'm like back in this like Christian world. Although nobody on my developer team was a Christian, so it was an interesting mix. But they did like these like religion books, similar to like Amazon does for Kindle. They had like a web app that they were putting their ebooks on, and it was like a lot of like 90-year-old, like churchgoers that are like, I love this book. And it was crazy, because there's like a call center that they're calling into, these guys that are like sitting right beside me, but I'm like, you can go online and just press buy. Why are you calling this guy? It takes 4 times as long to do. So yeah, we were getting like these files that, the process was still never explained to me to this day. These like files that were like this jumbled up HTML, and we had to make it look clean and good, and so that it would fit into this web app, and then it would be thrown out there to these people that are buying like these ebooks. Well, I was like, that's simple enough. It'll be a great first job for me. It's basically only HTML and CSS. I can get really good at that to where I'm like expert level, and then I can be like learning stuff on my own through like Lynda, all these other things, and then eventually I can move on to something else. And I say that, but also back to that thing of if I knew then what I know now and all that. And I think I remember telling John this, that like, I'm not going to be like one of these tech guys that just jumps from job to job. Like, I want to go somewhere long term and stay there, be committed to this company. Because all I heard was these stories about like, you could just work a year here, work a year there, and like just kind of run after the money, run after the latest technology. And I was like, not me. I just want a job because I was terrible. Now I'm halfway decent. I just want a job. I'm going to stay there because if I can trick them into hiring me, I don't ever want to leave again and have to do that again. But it turns out I kind of am doing the opposite. I follow the money. But I'm there. One of the reasons I went to Lifeway was I went into my initial interview and I'm like wowing them with all these big tech terms that I just learned in my boot camp. And they were like, so there's one thing we need to mention. We're going to give up this office and we're all going to work remotely from home. Is that going to be a deal breaker? And I'm like, no. Like, I can have the flexibility to work from home. Okay. And for some reason, they were like really like I was going to walk out of the room with that.
Lifeway, right?
Lifeway, yeah.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, they're pretty. I mean, as far as in that field, like nationwide, they're probably the biggest. They have maybe one other competitor. Go ahead.
Were the people you were interviewing with tech savvy or more like human resource generalists?
That is a great question, and I should have touched on that anyway. So the question was, were my interviewers at Lifeway tech savvy? Short answer is no. I don't know that I fully realized that at the time. I thought that I was impressing people that knew what they were doing. But looking back, they had a guy that was leading the developer team at that point. Everything was completely rearranged a month into me working there. So if it would have been a month later and I was interviewing, things might have gone completely differently. But at the time, they had a guy that was, I guess he was head of acquisitions / head over developers. But he didn't know how to code. He was just like leading this team. So he was like managing developers as far as like, are you getting to work on time? Are you doing what you're supposed to do? But if you showed him the work, he would have no clue, what you were doing. And they did have like a lead on the developer team that obviously like knew how to code a little bit. So I had, the people in my interview were that guy, who was head of acquisition, so acquiring these files for us to do, the head of the sales team, and like 3 other coders or developers on the team. So it was pretty low level looking back on it, but I honestly think from the things that I've learned now, it could be like that for you, or it could be the complete opposite. Because so I've had 2 developer jobs, but I've interviewed.
I have a question. Just read that.
Okay, about to wrap up. I interviewed at a ton of other ones, and they prepped us for this at Coder Vox, to where, and if I'm like going too long and running over time, just tell me if you have other stuff to do. I was like, talk for an hour tonight. I'll never be able to do that, and I feel like I'm talking for a long time now.
This is all very helpful.
Oh, good. So at Coder Vox, like one of the things that we did to prep for interviews was like, here's a whiteboard, and they're like, code this out on a whiteboard, and I was like, what? Like, I need to look everything up, and to this day, I'm still not great at that, to where even if it's like a simple HTML thing, I'm always just like checking my syntax, like W3 schools, like just type in, even if it's like add email address, I'm like, just make sure. But so there are interviews that are like that. I had an interview at one big place that it was like 3 or 4 phases, because all these like tech companies, it's so funny because you go in there and you're like, okay, if I just like know this stuff, they're gonna want to hire me. But they'll be like, we don't just want your tech knowledge. We want to know that you're a right fit for us. What's the word that they use? Like culture-wise. We want to know that you can have fun. I had this one interview where I walked in and they're like, I'd done like this whole technical part, and I'm like, breathe a sigh of relief after you get done with that, because it's, what if they ask me a question I don't know, and then I'm going to sit there for a long time, and they're going to be like, why doesn't he know this? Well, I get through that, and so I'm like, the culture people come in. There's people coming in and out of this room. We want to make sure you're a good fit culture-wise. And they're like, let me give you a scenario. If you're in the office and you're talking to a customer, or you're in the middle of coding this thing, and somebody comes up to you with a Nerf gun and just shoots you, what's your reaction gonna be? And I was like, what? I think I'm supposed to say I'm okay with that, but that seems weird. But like, it's legit, like, if I would have said, that's not cool, they would have been like, get out of here. So you're going to go through a lot of weird stuff on that. But yeah, some of these places, like, I had to like whiteboard out some stuff. Some of that worked out well. Some of it was horrible. I'm just like drawing lines up there that I don't know what they mean. But yeah, so that particular one at Lifeway worked out well. I got that job. Somehow I tricked them into giving me more money. And like I said, that job ended up being like the perfect starter job for me. All my worry and all that turned out to be unfounded, and all thanks to John. He trained me up good.
Take credit for everything.
You've got to take it. I'm giving it. But yeah, the combination of John and just like putting in the work on your own, you've got to do that. Whether it's getting help from like all these other places that I was talking to or talking about online. There's so many tools out there. And I'm sure that they're giving you like articles and all that kind of stuff in here, because I still, if you look at my computer, all that stuff is still bookmarked, and if it was 2 years ago, but it's all still on there, and I'll refer back to it. Like, I was doing something in GitHub the other day, and I was like, I remember this article that blah, 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 and so I went back and I found the answer I was looking for. So that was cool. Anyway, so my Lifeway thing, turned out to be great. That people that didn't know what they were doing hired me, got on there, and then they hired somebody who is just a brilliant developer mind. He knew like every coding language ever, and said, for the most part, me and one other guy had developer knowledge outside of HTML and CSS, which automatically elevated me, and I was able to like move up that team to one of the lead developers. And this guy came in and he was like, I'm going to transform this team. I'm going to teach them things. And so that was a cool experience, because we had a ton of trainings at that point. A lot of them like via Google Hangouts and stuff like that, because we were working from home, which was great. And then we went back and forth between here in Nashville some, because that was the base. That's where my boss was located. So it was a crazy first experience too, because if I would have been told before that you're going to be working from home remotely, you're going to be a developer, you have a lot of freedom because you're working from home. So you do have to have that discipline in order to do that, because it sounds super great, but it's so easy to be like, I'm going to not do anything this afternoon because nobody will notice. We'll come to find out they do have this thing on our computers where they can track everything that we're doing. So you have to be a little smart about it and at least move your mouse every once in a while. Not that I ever did that. That shows some of the IQ on our team, is that some people just like not touch their computer for a couple of days, and our boss would be like, I can see that you've done nothing. So that was crazy. But yeah, we did a ton of training, and it helped, with the bootcamp knowledge. I was able to help out other people on the team. Your boss sees that. I'm automatically elevated. So it was cool.
Did you have a special space set up for doing work, or did you just do it, for instance, in the main room of your house? Yeah,
that's a good question. So the question was, did I have like a work area in my home, or was it just kind of wherever? So when I started off there, the first couple of months, we were working from an office, which was good for me because I was able to like meet people on the team. and kind of learn their processes on how they do things. And then we went completely mobile. And so one of the things that we talked about a lot is our bosses really wanted us to, and they gave us like stipends for, if you don't have a desk, we'll give you money to get a desk because we want you to have a specific work area. And they were like, I wish I still had this because it's so funny. They gave us like this bulleted list of like things to do when you're working from home. Dress like you would if you're going to an office. And I'm like, there's no way. Like, if I'm wearing pants on most days, that'll be amazing because if I'm on video, you're only going to see from here up anyway. So that didn't really happen, but they wanted you to feel professional. But yeah, so they were cool about, at first we had to take, so I learned all my developing on a Mac, and they were all Windows there, so that was kind of a transition. But when our new developer guy came in, he bought us all MacBooks. So that was great. And so I was really able to kind of excel to a new level because I was in my comfort zone again. Going back to your question that I didn't really answer at all. Yeah, they gave us money. So I went and I'd had like a smaller desk, but I really wanted, if I was going to work from home, I wanted to be comfortable. So they gave us a little bit of money. I probably spent a little bit more than that because, I'd like trick them into giving me more money at this job, so I had a little bit more. But yeah, I got a whole space. I wanted, multiple monitors. I wanted to feel great about working from home, and I put it in an area that wasn't like facing the TV, so I wouldn't be super distracted all the time. Although, there are times it's good to have that option. Once we got our MacBooks, I could just sit there and do work from the couch or whatever. But for the most part, if I was like hunkering down and really had to do stuff, I needed to be at my desk. So that was cool that they set us up with all that. But really for them, company-wise, by them getting rid of their super expensive office space that was like in the Domain, they saved a ton of money, so they were able to like get us computers and all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't like they were just super generous and buying us all this stuff. Like, it happened for a reason. Go ahead.
Like, what was, like, you kind of talked about your setup a little bit. Like, I mean, how many monitors do you kind of run now, or do you prefer to run with? And
so I have a little bit of a different setup at South by Southwest right now. But at the time I was, we had MacBook Pros, so I had the MacBook Pro like on a little stand thing and had another monitor along with that. And I had two monitors whenever we were doing Windows, and I used the Magic Trackpad and keyboard from Apple or whatever. So that's it. That's my comfort zone. But yeah, it just got to the point to where I think like all during the boot camp, I literally only used my MacBook and no other monitor, which I have no clue why I did that. Because now, if I'm ever doing anything coding wise and I have to like switch anything back and forth, I'm like, what am I doing? I could have two screens and multiple things. So it's great to have a lot of screens. And now at South by Southwest, I have like a mini Mac and I use my laptop, so I have like screens